Hey 3DMJers, this is Brad Loomis and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking with my fellow coaches, Jeff Alberts and Alberto Nunez, all about the ways we like to off-season here at 3DMJ. We'll get into the biggest mistakes we see bodybuilders make, how we monitor monthly and yearly progress, how long we think an off-season should be, and what you can do to keep your physique improving every contest season. Most importantly, we spend a lot of time discussing how we prefer our athletes to mentally approach their off-season and what type of outlook they need to adopt in order to continue seeing progress year after year. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Team3DMJ. Leave it under podcast number 144. Here is your best off-season yet, featuring myself, Alberto Nunez, and Jeff Alberts. Hope you enjoy the show.
So off-season optimization. Guys, what do you see being the most common error when it comes to the way people off-season these days? What do you guys see people do wrong most often?
I think personally it's too short. They're always too short. And unfortunately, it's kind of a product of the requirements, I guess, of the different natural bodybuilding federations, you know, having to compete like within a calendar year of winning your pro card and then having to keep up your pro status competing every 2 years, you know. But I think that's probably the most common, and unfortunately, it's probably the one that hinders people's physique progress the most. And I'm pretty strong in that opinion. How about you, Jeff?
I think people's insecurity of like having a little fluff on you. And we know it's not the most aesthetically pleasing. It's usually where we're the most uncomfortable. But if you stick with your off season and you kind of roll with it and you keep training, that's where you see the most gains. You know, that's where you're gonna basically, you know, earn all that muscle. But a lot of people's fear, insecurity, you know, it gets in the way, and that's where you start to see a lot of, you know, mini cuts come into play, and takes time away from the big picture, and that is depositing those pennies in the physique account. And like Berto said, you know, you want to save, you know, for a year, 2 years of off season. Just keep putting your pennies in the bank, and you know, when it comes time to do a contest prep, and if you do it right, you're gonna cash out, and you're gonna have a nice little vacation there when you're up on stage. So I think it's a lot of it's just trying to get people to stay true to an off season process, and like you said, Brad, it has to be a decent amount of time to kind of roll with that process.
You know, those two things kind of they intertwine a little bit, the length and then not being comfortable with the way you look, because I think that's one of the reasons that people shortchange the length of their off season, because there's still people out there who use even physique shows as a way to stay in shape, you know, as the carrot they're chasing. Like, this is how I'm gonna stay tight, and a lot of things wrong with that. There's probably better things you can do if like that is the number one priority, not necessarily maximizing gains, but that is what, you know, the vast majority of our audience is after. They want to reach near the limits of their muscle potential. And again, if you're having these 6-month off seasons, these 4-month gaining phases, and then you turn it into a 2-3 month mini cut because you don't like the way you look, muscle gain isn't necessarily something that we can rush. It just kind of happens at its own rate. And even when things are good and we're 1 or 2 years into our training, it's not as fast as, say, fat loss. So there's so much delayed gratification that one has to learn when it comes to the off-season side of things, when it comes to the muscle growth side of things, and I can see why it's quite challenging. But no, I think both of you guys are absolutely correct, and we might sound like a broken record, but that's because to this day, like, that is probably still what I see the most is people not spending or allocating nearly as much time as they should be on their gaining phases. Anything else to add to those?
I'd like to hear what you think, Bert. What's your most commonly seen error in the off season?
People buy clothes when they're lean because that's when they look good, and then
Yeah, I got two sets of wardrobes myself. Got my contest prep wardrobe, and then got my off season wardrobe. And usually like off season, because I'm already fluffy. I'm 2 months post show, and I'm a little on the fluffier side already. And I've had that thought in my back of my mind, like, ooh, I don't like the way this looks. Maybe I should cut back. But I'm like, no. I got to stay true to my process. But yeah, I'm wearing like darker colored t-shirts all the time now because I'm wanting to look leaner, So I'm like, hey, if I can't mini cut, then hey, I'll just wear some wardrobe that makes me look leaner.
Yeah, I've bought clothes that are just like too nice, and then I'm like, you know what? In 10 pounds, I'll still be able to fit this, and then I get to 10 pounds, I'm like barely, and I gain another 10, and they're just sitting there, so they can look real nice. Hopefully, they're still in fashion next time I decide to compete. But I'd say, realistically, and again, this goes back to you guys, is that they just don't get it. They don't understand why this phase is so important. And what I find, I guess, ironic about this is that, most people who listen to this podcast who do the bodybuilding or some form of strength training seriously, and body recomping is big on their priority list. Say they have a friend or a family member who wants to join the gym, and this person wants to eat iceberg lettuce and cardio. Like that's literally their plan, right? Like almost right away, like they know inherently that, you know what, this person will probably get the most out of their body recomping process if they ate at least enough, they ate a high protein diet, and if they train progressively with weights, right? So here they know that this is what can impact the way you look more than anything else. Just like do these things on this list. But when it comes to themselves, like, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's mostly a little bit more complicated in that it just takes a little bit longer because at this point you're pretty damn well trained. So I guess, yeah, forgetting what you preach, that like spending enough time, eating enough, lifting weights, for most people, if you give them enough time, that's what's going to change the way you look more than anything else. So yeah, I've and time matters so much that I've seen cases where the person didn't necessarily take their training super seriously. Maybe they weren't perfect with their eating, but they were eating enough and they were training at least three times a week. A lot of time goes by, like 5, 6, 7 years, and they look totally different to the point where they're like, oh, wow, this bodybuilding thing that at some point I was kind of like, I'm done with. I think I want to give it a shot because I've made some gains. So yeah, when it comes to gaining muscle, because you can't rush it, you can't. I think time is the biggest thing, and taking this phase seriously and understanding the power of just eating enough high protein diet and training progressively. Like you do that, and man, you're gonna change. There's just no way around that. So, yeah, really realizing the power in this and how much this is going to change you more than that 10-week mini cut you want to go on so that you can look good on the beach for all these strangers that you don't even know, So,
I mean, that's it. Like I've had many athletes, I'm sure you guys have had this happen too, where you work with some athletes and they bought into it. They bought into that process of, hey, we're going to eat enough here. We're not going to be overly concerned about how we're looking or what we're weighing or anything like that. We're just going to train and we're going to make sure that's well fueled. And, a year goes by and it's like, oh, okay, they see the value in that. They can look back to the before and the after and go, okay, now I fully understand exactly what you're talking about on day one. It's getting people to buy in and then have trust in that process. But the problem and the issue with a lot of people is there's no instant gratification to that. you're not going to see like huge changes in a month, 2 months, 3 months, or maybe not even 6 months. But like you said, a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, that's where you start really seeing the differences, in your physique. And it's all fueled through the weight training. And learning how to diet, and that's important too. So often you'll see individuals that, okay, yeah, I just went on a 4-month gaining phase or maybe a 6-month gaining phase. That might have been successful, but then if they're not experienced enough to diet properly, they end up losing all that anyways through the dieting process. So that's where people end up spinning their wheels, and they get frustrated, and it's just a lot of up and down. Like if you were to look at it on a graph, it's like they're bulking hard, cutting hard, bulking hard, cutting hard, and their end product is not really a good representation of what they want. Whereas if you go patient, if it's, you look at it on a graph, if you go a gaining phase of a year and it's slow, gradual, nothing too crazy, and then maybe you cut after a year's time, maybe 2 months or whatever, and you do it properly, you're going to have a better recomp in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. But it's getting that buy-in, from people to have that patience. And this is coming from someone who's been doing this for 34 years. And yeah, I get it, man. When you're in the off season, it's not fun to not look like a guy on Instagram that just looks awesome all the time. You're like, oh, I want to look like that. But, eventually down the road, if you do things right, you're setting yourself up for long-term success by doing that.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point, and you guys can tell me if you agree with this or not, but I mean, you're not going to be able to just infinitely keep gaining weight, right? I don't think anybody is saying that you should just keep gaining, keep bulking to, and really, I don't even know if it's even possible to do that, to just keep gaining, and to make yourself obese. Well, I guess I shouldn't.
It's possible.
It's
possible. It's just not conducive.
But I mean, unless you really try, to do that, in my opinion, at some point, it almost is not even about paying attention to your weight. You're not trying to gain weight. You're not trying to lose weight. You're just eating, and you're trying to focus on number one, performing really good in your training. And then number two, just trying to be healthy, more than anything. So many people do such unhealthy things, both directions, trying to cut and trying to gain. And they're so focused on that one thing, on what their body weight is doing, they really lose sight of what makes them healthy and what makes them perform good. And I know that's kind of been, especially with a lot of not only my long-term clients that I've either done Skypes with or off-season / Gen Pop type training for a real long time, but also for myself. I don't weigh myself right now. I think I weigh myself at most once a month. Otherwise, I'm trying to figure out things like, oh, wow, you know what? If I drink a liter of water and a nice high protein, medium sodium meal an hour before my training sessions are consistently very, very, very good. You know what I mean? I noticed that, and just things like that. My cholesterol is lower if I make sure that I have my 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every single day. Stuff like that. It's not even about weight. It's not about body weight. It's not about what I'm looking like. It's about performing good in the gym, and it's about making my body probably as healthy as it can be for the purposes of performing in the gym.
I think it's also important too to make sure, as far as body weight, you are in a position where you can perform well. Like if you're, let's say, a little too lean, like no matter what you do, you're not going to probably perform as well as you can if you're at a body fat level that's conducive towards performance in the gym. So it gives you more leverage and things like that. And obviously you need to be eating enough to support all that. So I would say I agree with what you said, but at the same time, I think we have to get ourselves in a place to where our settling point is going to maximize ourselves in the weight room. So I could look back at my like after my 2014 contest season, where I had in my mind, I'm going to stay 10 pounds over stage weight because I want to stay leaner because I'm an older guy now. Well, what I realized was, one, leverages weren't all that great in the weight room, and I was a little on the hungrier side. I was food focused a lot. So it wasn't until I said, okay, let me push body weight up a few more pounds. And that's where things started to really feel a lot better, like not just with performance, but recovery and just overall mood, energy levels, that type of thing. So I think it's like when you come out of, let's say, a contest prep, like, yeah, we want to kind of pay attention to getting our body weight up to a certain point. So of course we got to kind of monitor weight. But once we get more to that settling point, that's where we kind of say, okay, let's back off on weighing daily and that type of thing, and being so OCD as far as like, tracking food and that type of thing. So it's kind of like a process, if you will, of getting to that point. So that's kind of my thoughts of like, when I try to get my athletes, I want to get them to a place where, like, it's kind of like what Eric mentioned a long time ago when he was doing his presentations about getting people, like in a swimming pool, you put them in the shallow end, they learn how to swim, eventually they get to the deep end, and then that's where it can be a little more flexible, and eventually they're free swimming in the ocean. And that's probably where Berto is right now in his off season. He's like, he's like a little whale out there just going like crazy. But
I'm very buoyant. Yeah.
So that's kind of like, for me, like, it's kind of what I did after this last contest season I just got done with, is for about the first month, I kind of like was monitoring things, but now I'm like, okay, I'm living life. I got enough body fat on me now. Training is really solid. I'm recovering well. And so I can be a little bit more relaxed with those things, but not relaxed with training. Like, the intent is on my train. Like right now, like every session I go in there, I'm like thinking I'm going to be very intentional. Either I'm trying to push loads up or I'm trying to get more reps. But that effort in the gym is what's going to drive your gains. And the food is there to just kind of support that. So that's kind of my thoughts. And I'm out of shape for being off season. I need to take a break from talking, so I'll let someone else talk right now.
Well, and Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit here, because if memory serves, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you were trying to hold your body weight at like right around 190 pounds, weren't you having a lot of issues with, like, it seemed like your elbow was bugging you and your feet were bugging you and you were having all kinds of recovery issues?
Yeah, so I was like roughly 10, 12 pounds over stage weight. And that's where I had like elbow tendonitis, shoulder issues, like just a lot of aches and pains in general. So my recovery really wasn't that great. And my training wasn't like, it was like too intense or there was too much volume or anything like that. It was kind of like my norms from prior off seasons, but it was just the fact that I was in a depleted state pretty much. So it just made it harder to recover from that training. And also too, I remember at the time I was doing a lot of extra work, like painting and doing some things around the house. So that just kind of exacerbated the issue. And I know a lot of our athletes, they're not, some of them aren't desk jockeys, they got physical jobs and things like that. So again, if you're not kind of watching body weight in a way and you're too lean, then yeah, you can run into issues like I did and just have a very non-productive off season. And that's the last thing you want going from contest season to contest season is, you have a year-long contest season, you get on stage the next time, you're like, I didn't make any gains. And I know for me, even if I win a show and I didn't make any gains, I mean, deep down, I'm like, I really didn't better myself, even though I got a first place trophy.
And shoot, both things that you guys mentioned are man, they're high on my priority list as well. I think the first thing is, like Jeff said, is make sure you get to a good place and start gaining from there. You'll definitely get people who have the willpower, but perhaps not the physiology. Most people don't, to start gaining from like 9% body fat up to like 13, because 13 is really freaking still lean. Like 13 is, I think, what most people think is like single digit, to be honest. And that's where they work from. And for most people, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. And even people with like lower body fat set points, whenever I've seen them allow themselves to gain weight, and the other get themselves to the point where this is maybe not the most comfortable situation, but in regards to like bottom line gains, it's pretty crazy the stuff that happens. So yeah, get your body fat to that safe zone, and like Brad mentioned, is like kind of focusing on because a lot of people try to build up those good habits when they're going through a fat loss phase. When it's like, no, probably this is probably not the best time. Contest prep, there's a lot of things that you were doing that you probably want to forget. Things like Arctic Zero, the Walton Farms. You want to forget that you did that and tell nobody. So with the off season though, like, how about this? Like, here's a time to like rewire. It's way easier to rewire yourself mentally and like start focusing on things. Like for me, hydration is a huge, huge thing. It takes me like 4 months of prep to get to the point where I finish a gallon of water in a day. Like, it's bad. So this off season, it's been like Brad, it's been one of those things where it's like, okay, before I head to the gym, like an hour before, it's like I'll make sure that I'll get like somewhere between 20 to 30 ounces of water, and huge game changer. And like I'm actually like I crave liquids now. So again, off season, probably the best time to rewire a lot of these habits that are kind of holding you back, whatever it might be, and not necessarily like most fat loss phases, because a lot of those habits and systems that you build up, probably not the best way to live full time, and quite often they don't necessarily help you when it comes to maximizing your muscle gaining during a period of caloric surplus. So yeah, I think habit building is huge. I think this is the best time is when we are fat-ish, like we're thick, and we're not all that hungry, and we have energy, right? And ready to take on a little bit more in regards to challenges, and not just like the weights, but things outside of the gym. So to me, that's huge. Is like off season's a good time for me to like rewire things a little bit. Do you guys agree with that?
For sure. Can I go back just a little bit and ask you guys a question? So
Yep.
I think a lot of people, they kind of focus on numbers. Like, let's going back to the body fat percent. Like, I heard you say 13% body fat. And right now I'm already kind of envisioning people listening to this going, where should I have my body fat? Where does it need to go? Like, they're so focused on a number that they lose sight of how they feel, like where their energy levels are, performance, recovery, aches and pains, that type of thing. Just like, so how do you guys determine, or how do you coach your athletes to get them to, let's say, focus less on, hey, I need to be 15% body fat or 10% body fat, and more towards what's an ideal set point for that person? Like, what are the markers that you guys are looking for that might help other people that are listening to this kind of like, not say devalue the numbers, but put more emphasis into how they're actually feeling?
I'm going to let Berto go first, because I could get super long-winded answering that question.
Good, because I could catch my breath then.
Man, shoot, it's just like, it's definitely a case by case thing. It has to be, because as I think of all these rules of thumb, it's like, okay, like you should be at the place where your body weight would kind of settle on its own. But then we have some people who are like really just like hungry people, and it's like, and they kind of left to just eating until they feel they are content. It's like, holy crap, we started this gaining phase at 170 and somehow you're 225. So there's people who are wired that way, and there's people the wired the other way, that they'll slowly lose weight, right? We just end up in the same spot after months and months of doing this. So I do like the idea of metrics and numbers for someone who's like really, really lost, right? Until they get to that point where, they've kind of come into their own, and through data, like numbers and supplementing those numbers with like their feels, they can kind of determine what that zone is. The truth is, though, that for most people, that zone where like you're going to make the juiciest of gains is probably not your favorite look. And that's just how it goes. And you're going to have to be okay with that. And a lot of people, it takes them a few tries before they get to the point where they're like, okay, like, I'm be real with myself. This is probably not the best place, like, for me to, to kind of float around. So determining that, I think a coach helps a lot. I think finding the balance between where you're progress in the gym is like super predictable. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Where when you get to that point where you're making pretty steady gains, and actually that's probably the best one is like if you're on a sound program, it's going to be when you cross that threshold where it's like, okay, things are just kind of happening. Obviously it's never super easy. You're still going to have a few moments of frustration here and there. But for example, I know that if I'm in the 170s, not a whole lot happens. I get to 180s and it's like, okay, I'm not necessarily super digging the way I look, but like some pretty cool things start to pop off. I get myself into the mid 180s, closer to 190. It's just like a freaking cheat code, at least to me and how I experience things at this point. But 190 is definitely not necessarily my favorite look of all time. But then if I get to 195, it kind of continues. And then if I get too close to 200, it just doesn't really change. And then at that point, it's like, all right, maybe you've gone too far. So you can kind of see things start to flatline performance-wise. But that'd probably be the biggest one. But then, of course, like for some people, because of how they're wired, like for them, their version of like my 190, where things are just like, whoa, I can't believe all these gains for me. They feel like they're starving. Right? Like they feel like they're starving. They feel like and for other people, they feel like even worse than I do in regards to like doing what it takes to gain this weight to get to this point. So again, it's not unfortunate, but we work with humans, I guess. But bottom line is when you start to like feel yourself in the weight room, that's probably when you start hitting a few lifts, it kind of make you forget that, oh shoot, like my lower back fat leaks out of my sweats. Like that is probably the sweet spot.
That's kind of like for me right now, like the hour I'm in the gym, I mean, things are flying right now, but it's like the other 23 hours, I'm like, oh, yeah, this isn't the greatest look, but it's that hour that I realize, okay, what I'm doing, if I stay true to it, it's going to pay off. What about you, Brad? I'm ready for your long-winded answer.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I've really done a 180 on this. I really have, and I think what was the convincing thing for me that made me do this 180 was, the couple of papers that Eric and Slater and Dieter and those guys did in August of last year. I've always been of this mindset that your best approach is just gaintain. Gaintain. Don't ever mini cut, but don't get yourself fat. Just try to always gain strength in the gym, make progress in the gym. But just if your weight's maintained, it's okay. And that was kind of my definition of gain strength in the gym, maintain your weight. If it goes up, fine. But as long as you're working for maintenance, it shouldn't go up, at an exacerbated rate. And like I said, I've done a 180 on this right now. We talk about times where we feel like we were wrong and we wish we could go back and change it. And I've changed it, because, those papers were very revealing. It was like, you know what, you can do that, Brad. You can gaintain, but you're going down the road about 30 miles an hour, whereas if you push yourself and let your body weight go up, eat some more calories, get yourself a little bit pudgy, maybe a little bit fat, now your work is going down the road 50 or 60 miles an hour. And it was a big game changer for me. And so now, of course, I actually let my clients get a little bit on the pudgy side. And yeah, we do mini cuts like every 9 months, a year, something like that, and not just, try to sort of work endlessly at what now I feel like is just kind of a suboptimal environment for building the most muscle that you can for your effort, especially in light of the recent research. But it's an evolution. Like Berto, you mentioned how 13% is still really pretty freaking lean. I'll bet you there's probably not very many people out there that would agree with that. But Alberto's absolutely right. And I'm going to share you guys a little story. I mean, I don't know what my body fat is right now. I'm easily 205, 206 pounds. I guess it's 23% body fat, something like that. I did a CAT scan on myself, and I was shocked what little body fat I was seeing on my body, on my CAT scan. And that's there's no, you can't fake it. You know what I mean? I mean, sure, it's a somewhat flattering position. You're laying flat on your back. You know, your arms are over your head. Things are kind of stretched out, so you're not all hunched over grabbing your fat rolls. You know what I mean? But still, I mean, there's like, I didn't have the tools to measure the thickness of my body fat. But I mean, guys, I'm looking at like 2.5, maybe 3 centimeters of body fat on my fattest area, like right at my belly button between my abdominal muscle and my skin, okay? And about the equivalent of that, maybe 4 centimeters of body fat on my love handles between like the skin and my outer glute muscle, right? That's not very much body fat. You know, when you look at like the average person that, you know, you scan over and over and over and over again, people would look at my CAT scan and say, he didn't really have any body fat. And I'm like the fattest I've been in a long time. But it's changed my mindset. It's changed my mindset because here I am thinking to myself, I'm fat. You know, I can barely see my upper abs if I'm flexing and I exhale. You know what I mean? Maybe I should cut here at some point, you know, to basically, it's like, wow, not only do I not want to cut, I'm thinking I'm looking pretty damn good right now. I'm looking pretty damn big and I'm liking how I'm looking. So, I mean, that just goes to show you that, like I said, I don't know what my body fat is. It's easily 20% more, but that CAT scan doesn't lie. There's not a whole lot of body fat on me. And, you know, here again, my focus now is going to be not even numbers on the scale, you know, not even really numbers that I'm putting into me, other than I'm just making sure I'm getting about 150 grams of protein every day. My focus is, okay, you know what, Brad, you're pushing 50 years old. Probably ought to hop on the recumbent bike and work on your cardiovascular health a little bit, you know. Maybe you ought to think about drinking more than just your 1.5 liters of water before your training. Maybe you should think about drinking 3 liters of water, you know, outside of your training. Maybe you better start thinking about making sure that, you know, you get frequent blood tests and make sure your cholesterol is good and all this kind of stuff. Because all that is going to bleed over into my training. And if my body's not only performing good in the gym, but just performing good, period, that's going to maximize the muscular gain and my time in the gym. And if and when I do ever get on the bodybuilding stage again,
not if, you will.
I don't know if I can guarantee that, but I can guarantee that my physique is going to look a whole lot different. It's going to look a whole lot different because it already feels different. Like I don't know what it feels like to be Bryce Lewis, but sometimes I feel like Bryce Lewis with muscle and freaking girth just bulging out of my skin sometimes.
I'm gonna my next training session, Brad, before I walk through the door, because like right now my son's doing karate, so he has to bow before he gets on the mat. I'm gonna bow before I walk in the gym, and I'm gonna go, I'm Bryce Lewis. And I'm gonna have a crazy workout.
Really crazy freaking session.
But you know, that kind of reminded me of like some of my athletes that are a little insecure of, let's say they are a little higher up in body fat and they're like, oh, you know, I feel fat, or I don't like the way I'm looking. It's like if you give a context of, like, a lot of them, I tell them, hey, if I was to take you to my local mall here in my city and I put you on stage, you know, and take a poll of everybody that's walking through the mall, what do you think this person looks like? And I would say 99% of the people would say, oh, she looks great, or hey, he looks great. It's basically, you know, our perception is we're in this world of physique sports or fitness that's all we're kind of seeing is that. Like, but the reality is that's such a small niche of people. But if you go into the real world, like you, Brad, if I take you to the mall, everybody's going like, damn, that dude's pretty jacked. he's got a great dad bod. Look at that, you know? So it's just like our perception sometimes, like we're kind of our own worst critic, our own worst enemy at times.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ, we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.
So learn to love your off-season body. I think that's or your gaining body, which I do think you get to the point where that can happen. Actually, yeah. I have a few athletes who that's actually our goal, is to like actually look back at our videos from prepping, and it's like, okay, this has a lot of utility, like for what we wanted to do, but this is just like, you see how much of a disaster that is. Like, that is, we do it because we have to, you know. And like this is going to be the suit you're going to be wearing most of the time if you do the bodybuilding thing, right? So you should find positive things in I guess the appearance of the outfit. And one thing to note is, I feel that as time goes on, your habits get better to the point where what you're able to tolerate and work with, so long as it's physiologically reasonable for you, I think your gaining zones kind of come down a little bit. So, like part of my struggles with weight gain, it's a combination of things. It's like, okay, like just my body rather be smaller than bigger. But then also it's just like, I've been doing this for a while and I've been eating a certain way, and not a whole lot of people in this country stop and eat protein 4 times a day. You know, make sure they have X amount of veggies, X amount of fruit. And when you start including, it's going to impact your appetite if you're really paying attention to what's going on in a positive way. You do that long enough, eventually you kind of start to learn what is like a hunger, what is a craving signal, when you're actually like cool and got to push the plate away. So it's going to get better. You're going to find yourself on your Friday night date at the Cheesecake Factory just behaving a whole lot better. You know, it's like, no, baby, you eat the rest of that cheesecake. I need you to thicken up, you know, because I'm doing my part. So it gets better. It gets better. Like and again, off-season habit forming. Eventually, you might not need to hover here to make progress and feel comfortable and be a good person. You could maybe do it 10 pounds lighter. So, but again, you need to hang around in the off-season long enough in order to develop a sense of like, this is okay, like to look this way, and to develop these good habits. Off-season habits will definitely, or gaining habits will cross over into your prep more often than I mean they should. Whereas like the other way around, the fat loss stuff not necessarily doesn't transfer over the other way quite as well. So yeah, no, I think the biggest struggle is just that, Jeff, the insecurity thing. It's that most people start doing this not because they're like, hey, I saw some dude in the Speedo while I was checking out at the local grocery store and I wanted to go do that, right? It's more so like, I didn't like the way I look. I want to go change the way I look. And now it's like, holy crap, look at the small print. Like, I spend a lot of time in this status that I don't necessarily like all the way yet, but it's something that, again, you grow to like, and a lot of it is our own perception because of what we see every day and because of what the fitness industry does show us. Yeah.
And I mean, and the bottom line is that we're bodybuilders. You know, we're competing in a bodybuilding sport. And if you kind of compare to other sports, you know, sometimes the practice is not very fun, but you're getting better, you know, when you are practicing for the game. You know, Andrea Valdez, for example, she is doing flippies like crazy. And she's talking about how, you know, they look like garbage, you know, and probably for her, it's not a whole lot of fun, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, this is when she's getting better. And us as bodybuilders, where's our practice? You know, if we want to maximize our practice, if we want to maximize our practice time, we can't do that unless we've got that optimal environment for building muscle. And I think you said, Jeff, earlier that, that would be not too good a feeling to be getting up on stage and not looking any different, basically looking the same. And I've kind of been there, I've kind of done that. And it was basically because I wasn't spending enough time in the off season, in that, I hate to use the word optimal, but in that environment for building muscle. I was spinning my wheels, I'm revving the throttle, I'm going 20 miles an hour, and as bodybuilders, our practice, our time that we're getting better for the game is the off season.
Totally agree.
Jeff, you look like you're processing that.
I was processing it, but I was also thinking back to, because the question I asked you guys was about how do you guys go about maybe having athletes not focus on numbers. But on the flip side, if we have, let's say, someone who just came off stage and at the end of 2019, like I did, and they're planning, let's say, to compete in 2021. So now there's kind of a time component there. So I guess looking at numbers and setting up guidelines is a good way to direct people. But again, the way I kind of do that, like I'm like, okay, I want this person to be X amount of body weight because I'm estimating more or less maybe where their settling point might be. Of course, I'll adjust it as we go. But I have these landmarks that I'm trying to hit. So I don't, let's say, have an athlete go the other, like too extreme as far as what we're talking about. Okay, now they're 25% body fat or 27% body fat. Well, that just means, okay, now we just basically ate ourselves out of a prep in 2021. So I think talk about that, you guys, as far as like how you guys go about setting up like someone who's just got off the stage, this year, maybe 2 years down the road, they're going to be getting up there again. How do you guys guide that off season, which in reality is maybe about a year's worth of off season?
Yeah, and it's not much if you think about it, because some folks, like Berto said earlier, with a case-by-case basis, some people can make themselves miserable trying to eat enough food to gain weight, and they're still lean. They still have that low body fat settling point. And then you've got others who, with very little appetite, can easily eat themselves 25, 27, 30%. So there's definitely a case-by-case basis, but I know with me, I'm using photos, a lot more with my off-season athletes than I used to. Trying to be less data and number-driven. And I think it just kind of coincides with, kind of this recent evolution of 3D Muscle Journey, where we're kind of like, okay, let's get away from tracking macros, and tracking food intake, and maybe for a little while get away from weighing ourselves every single day or 4 times a week or whatever, and more so think about, well, let's just get a body weight once or twice a month, but then let's look at how the physique is looking. And like you said, Jeff, if we've got a show, that's probably only a year away, I probably am going to have that person stay a little bit tighter. And maybe that period of time when we don't track food and we don't get body weight 3 or 4 times a week, it's going to be a lot smaller. It might only be like a month or 2 in between, our recovery phase and when we got to start dieting again. But yet at the same time, I almost hate those situations. And it's like I'm trying to talk people out of that. It's like I'm trying to talk people into saying, okay, let's not compete next year. Is there some way we can get out of it? Can you write the promoter some way to make that off season longer so that we can make that period of time where we're not so focused on numbers, and we're not so focused on the physique, and we're not so focused on calories and body weight and things like that for a longer period of time. Maybe we can do that for 8 months, and then we've got this recovery portion, and then we've got the diet portion on each end of that 8 months. So I guess that's kind of the two opposite ends there, where you've got somebody that is going to compete in about a year. Now that true off season where you're developing good habits and trying to get out of the habit of trying to get the most tasty food that you possibly can that fix your macros and whatnot. The good habit portion might be a very short period of time. As for those folks that it's going to be 2 or 3 years, we can make that portion a longer period of time, all the while, kind of keeping an eye on the physique and maybe getting a little bit more pudgy if it's going to be 3 years, and maybe not as pudgy if it's only going to be a year.
How about you, Bert?
Coming off the stage, right?
Yeah. So if you have an athlete that just coming off the stage and they want to compete, 2 years from now, like a 2-year window there, what would that kind of? Obviously, it's going to be very individual, but just in general, it's leaving you with maybe like a year of off season.
Yeah. We need to go through a recovery phase, and I think if you're very committed to that, the vast majority of people, like they're actually pretty good within month 1 to 2, which is so crazy. The old saying used to be, whatever the length of the prep is, that's how long it's going to take. And it's like, holy crap. So if you just prep for 7 months, so you add another 7 months, and damn, like that's you just messed up your life for 14 months basically. So hope your trophy was nice. So I like this. I like the way we do it, where it's like, okay, that's priority 1. We're really not going to get into fun stuff and start pushing until we're like, okay. And still, like, everyone I've taken through that recovery phase, at the end, they're very happy that we did it that way. Super happy. Like they go back and they're like, okay, I was kind of about this, but I'm so glad we did it this way because I'm back to my normal self. I don't necessarily miss the shreds, and I'm very excited about the gaining phase from here. So, okay, we get them to the point where they're, say, 9% above their stage weight. This is where we kind of settle down. From here, we start doing work, and what I like to do is give them, see the length of the gaining phase. And again, like in this case, it's about a year. And then these are weight gain ranges that I give them. So kind of working backwards, it's like, okay, from here, you're going to gain anywhere from 7 to 13 pounds, okay? And I like these big ranges because for most people who are new to bulking, they're probably going to be closer to 13. But so long as it's kind of written as part of what we were looking for, hey, it's okay, coach, I gained 13.5. I'm like, okay, it's cool, don't worry. The first week of dieting, you lose 2, we're good. So, like, and then over time, what ends up happening if they allow me to say, like, give them another off season, is like they'll see that gain of rate, they're able to control it a lot better. And it's like, okay, the next gaining phase, say it was another 10 months, right? They gained 9 pounds. And it's something that we continuously work on over time. Because what's the issue with most people is that they're like, coach, like, this lean gaining thing didn't happen. It's like 4 months and I want to turn around. So I like working backwards. I'll give them these gaining ranges. This is the length of time, 7 to 13 pounds. We have 10 months to make this work. Let's get on it. And maybe, the first time they might blow it by a little bit. They might be on the higher end. But with every gaining phase, you'll see that they kind of tighten it up a little bit. So it's kind of the same dealio with me right now. It's like I want to get up to like 195. That's about 6 pounds. And I'm giving myself about 6 to 7 months to make that happen. Some months are going to be faster. Some months are going to be slower. But at the end, about that net amount of anabolism took place. So, yeah, I kind of like leading them that way and giving them like targets that are reasonable but broad, and trying to have them make it happen, around somewhere around there. It's never perfect, but usually they get it pretty close to right the first time. But then there's that one issue where it's like, let's just say it's a 3-year off season, just to kind of throw in the scenario there, and they're at the high end of their body weight. I really don't see a purpose for anyone who's a physique athlete in most cases to get above 20% above their contest weight. In that case, we do the kind of, hey, let's just maintain and eat progressively and train progressively and eat enough. But
because at that point they're in a good environment. I mean, so it's like, it's just kind of like hands-off approach. You just train and you're good.
Everyone wants to recomp, but of course they want to recomp at like 13% and get down to 9% while they gain muscle. Probably not going to happen, right? But where I have seen recomps is people that just get to that body weight. They've been trying to fight forever, even though like there's a voice in the back of their head that tells them this is where you should be. And that's when it's like, holy crap, we're making gains all the time. And guess what? I think you look a little bit better than you did 3 months ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, once you kind of get to that settling weight, like if you stay there, the longer you hover there and you keep training, like you're going to make that look better over time. Like that weight might not change on the scale, but you start looking better over time the more you train. And that's another thing that, like when I get people set up, let's say on a Skype session and say, okay, we're not doing any cutting or anything. We're just going to gain for a year, not get fat, but we're going to slow gain. You get them to a certain weight and they just train. You look back a year later and they're like, whoa, okay, I see. Again, like kind of what I said early in the podcast, they see that change. And they see that's driven through the weight training itself, not through manipulation of like through diet a lot.
Yeah, and shoot, I mean, how many of our novices, you know, that we have out there that we finally talk them into getting out of the so much of the cutting and desiring the abs and whatnot, and shoot, they'll be sometimes 5 or 10 pounds heavier, and they look better 5 or 10 pounds heavier than they did when they were quote unquote leaner, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, shoot, I'll have novice lifters, you know, we'll just say male lifters that have kind of a pear-shaped look to them. They gain 5 or 10 pounds, and they actually start developing a bit of V-taper, you know, and they don't look like the pear, you know. They're thicker up top. It almost looks like their rib cage is thicker in a way. And yeah, I mean that's kind of true body recomp right there. You know what I mean? When you really change the look of your body, and either A, you've stayed the same weight, like you were talking about, Jeff, or B, maybe you gained 5 or 10 pounds and you look better now at 5 or 10 heavier than you did before.
I also think too, like it's because a lot of us will get caught up in those 12-week transformations. Like, oh wow, look, yeah, you see a lot of progress because they're obviously getting leaner over 12 weeks time, and it looks like awesome gains, but you don't see the aftermath. Like you never see the story after the 12-week transformation, because usually it's really assertive or really aggressive, and you don't see the aftermath of that. You know, most people are falling off the wagon after that. But what I've seen through our athletes, if they go through, let's say, a 2 or 3 year process of like getting them to a settling weight, letting them train there for a good long while, and like you said, Brad, maybe every 9 months, maybe a year, you mini cut them and you clean them up. One, they're going to diet properly because you're coaching them through it, so they're retaining the muscle mass they picked up. And then they just basically rinse and repeat that process again. Well, there you go. You're having a very conducive recomp over a 2-year stretch, but the behaviors aren't all over. They're not like aggressive. They're not up and down. They're basically just smooth sailing through the whole process, because there's nothing drastic that's changing. Mm-hmm. So it's just small little manipulations through that process. So people aren't going to get erratic with their behavior. So it's more of a sustainable approach. It's more of a lifestyle too. Like you can do it 10 years, 20 years later. So that's what I like to coach a lot, is just selling more of a long-term process, having a patient approach, a conservative approach, one that's going to go towards practicality and sustainability. Anybody want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I guess I will. My favorite part about the off season is all the cool sports bras I get to wear.
And that's why I didn't say anything. I was trying to think of something real quick and witty like Berto just came up with, and it never happened for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not making stuff up, Brad. That's why that's what I do. Yeah. So I guess year-wise, yeah, it's to be quite honest, I think that's maybe. Fuck, you said a year. So I'd say a year is getting to the point where it's a pretty advanced bulk. Like when I give people like timelines, I think 6 months is a beginner bulk. If you could go 6 months without like having to, cut, you're doing really well. And the goal is to get to the point where you can do it for 1 year. And then I would hope so. Like if you are competing and stuff, it's like you can hold your shit for a full year and gain for a full year. But again, a year to a lot of people is a long, long time. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we put out some sort of poll, and the majority of our physique-specific athletes have not spent more than 6 months gaining. Because even like with most gym rats, it's like cold months you do that. Right around February, March is like, all right, I got to start thinking about these summer shreds, and that's usually how that cycle goes. But you can get a lot done in a year. I think a whole lot done in a year. You can change your physique in a year for sure. But but again, with this gaining stuff, it's crazy what I have seen, and when people like, I remember Jeff. A lot of it was like muscle retention, but when you skipped out on 2010 and you came back, and I think it was 2011 that you competed. Like I think that was a really good off season on your part.
Yeah, and I had probably in my 40s. My best off season was actually 2012, 2013. Like that stretch there. I got injured. I was out, a little bit there, and I missed about 4 months of training, just because of family things. But outside of that, if you recall, I think I was weighing, my heaviest I got that offseason was 210. I was kind of doing a Bradley back then. But man, that's when I was hitting PRs. I was hitting 460 squat, deadlifting over 5, overhead pressing 2 plates. My performance in the gym was just through the roof. And when I started that 2014 prep, it was I started it at the peak of that off season, as far as performance. So when I started to diet down, I was firing. So I had the gains from the off season, plus I was starting in a great position with my training performance and all that. And, long story short, man, 50 weeks later, I got on stage. It was the best I've ever been. And at the age of 43. So that's kind of my game plan for me personally right now is this year I'm going to maximize. I'm not going to say optimize because I don't like that word. I'll maximize it. But I want to try to get my performance to the same, elevation or even higher if I can. So that way when I go to prep, if it's 2021, that I'm in a great position. So this whole year, I'm probably all the way through September, maybe beginning of October. It's okay, I'm going to maintain where I'm at right now because my weight's 190, 195, and that's a good place for me to be in. I feel good. Performance is good. Recovery is good. Not really banged up or anything. So I'm just going to stay true to that process, even though I'm a little uncomfortable at times, the other 23 hours of the day. But when I'm in training, that's just reassurance. I'm the trajectory I'm on is the right path. So I won't focus on trying to cut down until I actually go to prep. And that'll be maybe towards the end where I'm okay, let me just bring in some of those older prep habits back in there to clean things up a little bit. But outside of that, it's, trust the process right now with the off season.
Your physique looked awfully good though this year, Jeff, when you were doing that NPC show, and you did the Mexico guest posing. And I kind of think back to how that off season went, where it was kind of okay, got up quite heavy there in 2016, but then you kind of went through a prep, kind of in 2017, got down a little bit, but then you kind of pulled the plug, kind of went back up again, kind of end of 2017, beginning of 2018, and it seems like once you got that conditioning that we were after, after the Mayhem show, some of those check-ins that you were doing were some of the best I had ever seen on you. And that approach, I don't know, there was something, might have been a little bit on the long side, but at the same time, awfully effective.
I appreciate the nice words. So I'll give you my, because I've, of course, hindsight's a little more 2020. So I'll give you some context around that. So I had a 6-month off season. So the end of April, beginning of April 2018 to September of 2018, that was a 6-month off season. So that was after the failed prep and all that. So I ended that failed prep. I was 170, 175, somewhere in there, 180 maybe. And I got back up to 200 pounds, within 6 weeks. And immediately my training just skyrocketed. A lot of those aches and pains I had dissipated, and I was firing again. I'm okay, cool. I'm a little soft, a little looking the way I don't want to look, but I also know that, okay, this is going to fuel training. It's going to help a future prep. So that 6 month off season, very short, but it really kind of reassures me right now that if I go twice as long with it, what am I going to be able to do the next time I get on stage? And even at my age, I do think there's still a little more potential to get better. And I'm definitely going to keep trying like there is. But in a sense, I'm kind of like those people that spin their wheels. Like from 2016, 2017, it was letting my body weight get probably a little too high. So I was probably like a little too comfortable, like getting up to 210, somewhere in there in 2016. And then spending a lot of time dieting, basically. And because it was such an extended period of time of dieting, that's when my body was just like, what are you doing? And that's where I started getting injuries and all that. And it was just a terrible environment to be in to try to basically retain muscle. But that's what most people do when they're spinning their wheels, is they're either trying to stay too lean or they're dieting and they're wondering why they're not making gains. Or they're like kind of doing things backwards. Oh, I'm going to diet down to 10% before I gain. It's like, just be secure with how you're looking now and just train. Get yourself in a good environment to put that muscle on, because your body's going to look better, feel better once you start making those muscular gains. You could always worry about the dieting process later. So in a sense, I look back and I'm like, fuck, man, I wasted 2016, 2017, 2018 was like almost a waste as far as like those 3 years. But at the same time, I also know that I learned a great deal. And if I didn't go through that, then I wouldn't have had the season I just had. So in a sense, it's helped my trajectory now moving forward. So I'm pretty confident now. It's basically, I just took myself back to my roots. Jeff, you know better. Like in the old school ways is like eat, basically lift, eat, sleep. That was like, so that's kind of the general philosophy right now for me, is just like, okay, train, perform well, make sure I'm eating enough and recover. When it's time to diet, it's time to diet. So pretty confident that this season's going to be pretty fruitful, and I'll be 50 years old and I get to tell everybody, see, you can still make gains as a 50-year-old. You just got to be smart about it. You got to be consistent. Trust your process, and don't let the keyboard warriors tell you, you don't have any more testosterone, you can't make gains. So, yeah, we're gonna myth bust. That's what we're gonna do.
Test is zero. Yeah, Jeff, actually, I did something similar with my last offseason. It was probably the worst offseason I've had in a while. Similar reasons. I was hanging around like 172 to like 178, and a lot of it just because, man, the eating was pretty automated. It was pretty easy. I didn't have to push, and I mean, I looked good, but it was convenient. It was the easy way out in a way, and I was still training hard. But now I see when I train that hard is like the progress that just comes. So I've averaged about 10 pounds heavier than that last offseason, this offseason, and like the differences are like ridiculous. Like I said before, it feels like a freaking cheat code. It's just 10 pounds. Like for some people that's the answer. It's like, hey, gain 10 pounds. Like less crazy.
I'm gonna be in your ear forever on this. We're gonna be two old men on the porch. I'm gonna go, remember, Berto, when I told you to get to 190, 195? Nah, Jeff, that's too fat. No.
And here's the thing, I actually, like, I don't mind my physique at any body weight. Like, I'll fuck up your pool party. I'll show up, take off my shirt, and it's like, oh shit, I'm being honest here. It just got really bad. This is depressing, right? But yeah, it was just honestly at almost sheer laziness. Like that's probably what it comes down to. Just that.
But I will say I'm really proud of you, because there was a moment with this offseason you said, I'm gonna mini cut. You're like, I think I'm gonna mini cut now, because you were tired of eating. You were just like tired of eating, but you stuck with it. You didn't mini cut. You stuck with it, and I think it's gonna pay off.
And that was a year in that I wanted to mini cut, just because. Man, just no matter what I did, it wouldn't move. All I did was sweat more. That's not cool. But yeah, it's been a world of a difference. And I think, again, for most people, they're running around just a wee bit, especially if they're competitors or if they got a feed on their Instagram that is mostly fitness. They probably are running around a good 10 pounds not 10 pounds. I mean, that's a weird number, but they're running around a little bit lighter than they should be. That's honestly probably, along with time, those are probably the two biggest things. I mean, I think we have kind of narrowed it down. It's you have your fundamentals in place. You know how to
Let's do
write.
that. Let's do that. Let's do the takeaways, fundamentals, what we need in place for the off season, and then we can kind of end this thing. And then I can go stuff my face and make some more gains.
I'm gonna do cardio,
Mine-
man, because pool party's
I've
coming.
got to start with training, right? Because we've been talking about getting fat, getting skinny, and getting up to 210 and mini cutting. But yeah, Berto, I kind of want to hear your take on how you would like to see training in the off season kind of go.
Okay. Well, you started it first, bro. You're the first. You said length matters, my size king. And we all agree on that. It definitely matters when it comes to your off season. It has to be the first thing because, hey, how much fat loss can take place in 3 weeks? You can go on a pretty messed up diet in a sensible way. Like there's those protein sparing modified diets. Do not recommend that to like 99.9% of people. But you can do that, and it's like, whoa, yeah, you just shedded 4 or 5 pounds of actual fat in that time. But what can you do in like that same amount of time that we're talking about muscle growth? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Not even if you're a noob, If you're a noob, you've probably just gotten to the point where it's like, oh, shoot, I'm not sore anymore, right? So, yeah, length is important, and I think it needs to be the biggest thing you need to connect to the length of your gaining phase is probably how close you are to your ceiling if you're doing it correctly. So, for example, Josh, our free kid Josh, like it was a year off season, right? About a year and a half, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And in that much time, he completely like just revamped a physique that was already really crazy, but like a lot was done, right? It's like you fast forwarded like time 5 years is what it seemed like, right? When you look at his progress. But again, because it's funny because heck, his intermediate version of himself is like some people's like not even advanced, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of room to grow, so you might be able to get away with the 6-8 month length gaining phase. And to be honest, that's probably all that you can muster at this point. Like anything longer than that, you might not be able to manage all the way. But the longer you do this, probably the more time you're going to have to spend gaining as opposed to cutting, because it takes so damn long for you to grow any amount of muscle that's like obvious to the eye. So length is important. 6 months is a good beginner phase. If you can get it to the point where you can spend a year and a half in a surplus, you're a freaking champ, and you're in for some physique changes when you do decide to cut down. So, yeah.
Length matters.
Yeah, it's not the motion of your surplus, honey. That BS is like your mind. No.
What about you, Brad? What's your takeaways?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah. With Berto, I'm definitely in agreement there, like 100%. But I guess to expand on it, I try as best as I can to maximize time in the gym and minimize time out of the gym or having to skip movements because of injury or aches and pains and just life getting in the way. You know what I mean? So I really try to just set things up to where it's like, okay, this is something that we can adhere to all the freaking time for, like Berto said, 6 months, a year, preferably 18 months, just all the time, And then at the same time that I'm trying to set that up, I think there's something to be said for making progress when progress is not necessarily being made, just training in the gym. And so a lot of times, especially with me, I mean, you guys know how I like to kind of observe the numbers. And if I observe a particular block or mesocycle of training where we've seen some significant improvement, tonnages are going up, or average load is going up while the sets are staying the same, you know what I mean? I'll be like, you know what? Cool. that was an awesome block of training. Let's deload and let's do it again. Let's not do anything. Just do it again. Just train it again. And what it kind of looks like, if you kind of look at a line graph, it's kind of like you see this spurt of progress. You see this incline of progress over time, and then all of a sudden it's just a flat line. And I'll say, you know what? Let's just try to make this flat line last for a good while. If we can reproduce that same block of training over and over and over and over again, I think a lot of times there again, it's progress is being made without progress necessarily being seen on paper or in the gym, And then guess what happens? That's time under tension, right? You want to talk about time under tension? Talk about training and repeating a very productive block of training over and over and over again over time. Pretty soon, whether you transition into a different, periodization of training, you come back to that again, and all that time's paid off, and now you go through another spurt, another growth spurt of training, whether it be you're tracking, your volume through sets, or you're tracking your volume through loads going up, and making sure the sets stay the same. And then just ride that for a while. I think that's people don't, and we've got this a little bit. I think if I remember right, I just pulled it up on Eric's Instagram page, but I haven't found it yet. But like in December of last year, he put up a paper where it was like people weren't even doing their 1 rep maxes. They were kind of training habitually in the 6 to 12 rep range with high effort. And guess what? Their 1 rep maxes were going at. You know what I mean? And so there's progress being made, even though they weren't slamming those 1 rep maxes at the end of every block. And so I think that's kind of almost like a key thing, is kind of take advantage of those growth spurts and then just stay there. Just train that over and over and over again, that same block of training. And then if you do see a decline, it's not a big deal. Let the decline kind of happen. A lot of times it's going to work its way out, but if not, now you can intervene. Now you can say, okay, let's go ahead and increase volume purposely by adding sets. Let's intervene by, running some sort of a fancy high volume metabolic block thing, for a few weeks, or some transitional block. And then, by the time we get back to what it was that we're doing, we're kind of, we've got another little spurt that we've just kind of ignited, I guess you might say.
I was going to say, but to do all that, you need length. So
exactly.
Length times girth equals the size of your bicep.
Length really does matter.
We should put that on a square so that people have to tune into this one so they can learn how to oxy. So say nothing else.
My big picture takeaway or philosophy is basically like our bodies are a physique account, right? And the whole goal is to maximize your account to become rich. Well, in order to become rich, what do you got to do? You got to put deposits in the account. You got to put those pennies in. Well, if you're going to spend not that much time doing it, you're not going to be a very rich man. And if you're using your credit card often, which is, we'll just call it mini cuts, you're going to be like in the red quite often. So the whole thing is we want that time to save your money. We want intention with your training, like Brad's saying, like we want to get after it. And I mean, how many people have you seen go in the gym? You're like, oh man, they could be training harder. Like, you're only saving maybe half your paycheck when you're doing that. Deposit the whole damn thing. Get in there and save your money for length matters, right? For at least a year, right, Berto? At least a year, and cash out down the road when you got some wealth built up. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah. It's obviously it's the length of it, and then also the what mostly stops people is again, it's just like the insecurity with the way they look now. But but I mean, there's just so many things in life that kind of run parallel to that. Like distractions, things that you want now, where it's like, shoot, I can wait on this a little bit longer. So I think there's a huge life lesson there. Like if people think fat loss is like discipline, then that if you lost 30 pounds, it's like, damn, well, that's a disciplined person that like has patience and knows how to wait and knows how to put in the work day after day. It's like a gaining phase is even harder, and when you learn that skill, it's like, whoa, like it just unlocks a lot of other things that can be quite difficult when it comes to bodybuilding. I think that's honestly my biggest takeaway is that with the gaining phase, I think my big moment was when I spent 3 years in a surplus. I got a little carried away, but nevertheless, it was hard to see all my buddies like get like summer lean. I'm like, nah, I'll be here in Fat Guy Island. I'll see you guys when you guys are ready. But it paid off. By the time I did finally lean down, I'm like, wow, I think I have a physique that is kind of like maybe pro-worthy. I'm not sure yet, but this is what it kind of looks like from here. And it made all of that worth it. Like because I mean, yeah, much as I say I was comfortable, I wasn't comfortable all the time. Like there was times where I was like, man, I want to be able to like roll up in a stringer like this dude. I want to have a bicep vein. And this just takes so damn long. So yeah, a lot of lessons to be gained from this. Like that I think can run parallel to other things in life. And that's how you bodybuild correctly, in my opinion.
I think we nailed it.
Well,
Brad, you're gonna keep this going, aren't you? Okay, last one. Let's go.
It's definitely time to eat. But I just want to expand on what Bert said, because so many people do not understand the discipline that it takes to get yourself being uncomfortable. It's a totally different kind of discipline. There's discipline for counting your macros and dropping weight and starving and being hungry and all that kind of stuff. But it's a total different kind of discipline when you're like, you can lose weight. You could lose weight at any freaking time that you want to. But I can't. I should not do that right now. And a lot of times that's where we as coaches got to say, you know what? No, don't do that. Let's stay the course. I want you to just put the sweater on, quit pinching your freaking fat rolls, and just go to work. That's a totally different kind of discipline that is required, in my opinion, in order to get where it is that you want to be on the bodybuilding stage when you cut down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You got to, in my opinion, you got to live there.
I'm going to end it on this. So what I'm trying to do with my off season too, of course, make gains, but by wearing my hoodies, I'm trying to look like a Jedi Knight and make that look cool instead of wearing like the fancy tight stuff. So I'm trying to bring back, the coolness of Walmart clothes and things like that. So not really caring kind of what I look like and just training. So I'll end it there because I'm going to go eat some Oreos and then I'll put the Jedi Knight attire on afterwards.
All right, you guys. Thanks a lot.
Hey there, this is Coach Eric Helms. Thanks so much for listening to our show. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate just a couple dollars per month to our cause to help educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team by going to patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.